if members abstain from voting or object to the proposals. That concludes joint debate 11. Now we start joint debate 12. Mr. Leung Kwok-hun has already made the given notice to cut the expenditure under Head 30, Subhead 118, and this has to do with the provisions for institutions, for diets, and also for nicotine patch. We'll have a joint debate on these two. Mr. Leung Kwok-hun. Chairman, I'm a smoker. I have also been imprisoned. Please move Amendment 157. Chairman, I rise to move Amendment 157 and also Amendment 158. This is a joint debate or joint debate number 12.
Chairman, my amendments relate to subhead 30, Correctional Services Department. What do I want to slash the provision for nicotine patch? What do I want to cut it by $100,000? Because I think this item is superfluous. It is superfluous to ask people to quit smoking when in jail, because life in prison is so hard. I'm a smoker. Why am I addicted to cigarettes? Because I am too bored. I want to use smoking to drive away my loneliness. It's both a physical and psychological habit. Now, even when I'm in liberty, I have to take a puff or two. And if you ask me when I am in prison, don't I need smoke all the more? I would say yes. To be fair, a person who is addicted to cigarettes would only want to smoke more when he is in prison. He will not dream of quitting the habit. And if CSD doesn't spend money on cigarettes for inmates, rather it spends money on helping them to quit, this is unrealistic. Either you don't allow them to smoke at all. It's just like a detoxification. In CSD, I know there is a drug treatment center. For instance, a drug addict will not be allowed to take drugs in prison. Since cigarettes are not banned, not regarded as a drug in society, why should we spend public money to stop people from smoking? They're already addicted to cigarettes and they are so bored in prison. And the CSD has also abolished the measure to give each inmate, or to allow inmate to smoke 3 times in a day, morning, noon, and evening. This practice is already abolished. As a smoker, I would say that if you give me 3 cigarettes per day, it will make me psychologically more balanced. I don't know what is the motive behind CSD's purchase of nicotine patch. If CSD thinks that institutions under their management should be smoke-free, well, they can just impose a ban, but this will certainly give rise to a judicial review. The CSD will be accused of depriving inmates their rights, human rights. If CSD knows for sure that you cannot stop people from smoking, then there is no need to spend money from public coffers to help people to quit smoking. It might be useful in some other places, but judging from my experience, I tell you that this is useless. Why? Because I never read the Next magazine or East magazine, the 4 tabloids. But when in jail, I read them like treasure because it was so boring. When in custody, people's habit would change. Things that you didn't like to do, you would do it, and things that you like to do, you want to do them more. So I think we should cut it. We should cut this provision. And should we spend the provision on cigarettes instead? Well, this is to be further considered. Regarding diets, expenses on diets. Now, if I can really cut the provisions on diets from $97,240,000 to $7,240,000, then the only consequence is the diets would be of poorer quality. But this is because the tendering procedures of CSD has been criticized. I don't know whether the Audit Commission has ever done a value for money audit on this item. From my own experience, I fail to see how the food supplies could be so expensive, judging from what I ate when in prison. Perhaps it's just like what I said in the last debate. CSD used various ways and means to evade or to dodge the government's procurement procedures and requirements. I don't know whether they have done so. I'm sure the meals served by CSD have a lot of room for improvement in order to achieve value for money. Secondly, CSD should provide more diversity in food because the prisoners come from or of different nationalities. If we adopt the old approach, I'm sure ethnic minorities would find it hard to adapt. So my proposal to reduce the provision for diets is just to start a discussion on this matter. I hope that CSD will spend less to achieve a greater effect, and that is about seasonings. Chairman, I don't know whether you add seasonings to your food. If there can be an item on if seasonings can be provided, of course, pepper won't be available. But if some seasonings can be available, then without spending too much of public money, the taste of meals can be enhanced to suit the taste of different prisoners. Well, Mr. Chin Pui-chung said that he wanted liberty in diets. So I hope that CSD will allow inmates to have access to seasonings to go with meals. And I hope that inmates can have food, subject to inspection, of course, sent to them by their family members or friends, because this is allowed even on the mainland. This will not lead to management problem. For instance, if an inmate is given a can of luncheon pork, what's wrong with allowing him to have that luncheon pork? It will help us to reduce expenses, and then it will make the inmates happier. Will it be unfair if some inmates cannot afford extra food? I don't think so. So long as the meals served in penal institutions are nutritional and can be of a reasonable quality, then I think it is after all humane to allow inmates to have more enjoyable meals by accepting food sent to them by their friends and family. The CSD has undertaken that inmates be given a humane environment when they are in prison. So if this proposal will not lead to a security problem, then there is nothing wrong to allow inmates to have better meals through the assistance of friends and families. This actually can improve the law and the order and security of prisons. The reason being, better meals will satisfy the desire, appetites of inmates. And if they have more nutritional meals, then this can reduce their discontent or violence or aggression. I have pondered on this when I was in prison. Some inmates may not be able to get enough nutrition, then perhaps he will become aggressive. For instance, some people cannot take up iodine properly. And under prison rules, an inmate is required to consult a medical doctor first. And if it is found that the behavior is due to a certain vitamin deficiency, then it is better. Otherwise, it is impossible for an inmate to tell the medical officer that, well, when I was free in society, I take 100 milligram of, say, vitamin E every day. Can you prescribe the same for me? Of course, that won't be allowed. If we can extend their meal supplies, for instance, if I rely on certain food for a balanced diet, if my family or friends can supply me items to ensure good nutrition for me, if this is allowed without compromising security, I'm sure this will be helpful to inmates. This will ensure that inmates will have their basic desire or appetite satisfied. I think there is certainly a need for this reform to take place. I don't want to waste members' time, but you can click onto the internet and you can see reforms in prisons of other jurisdictions. This reform has greatly improved the order of penal institutions. So there is a scientific base for this. I'm a layman here, but I think the improvement in nutrition and meals in penal institutions can improve the management of such institutions. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. Chairman. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, some amendments are about meals and nicotine patches. I think the purpose is to start a discussion. I don't know whether he's going to say that he is not really for cutting these two items. Because if indeed we are to cut the provisions for meals from $97 odd million to $7.2 million, I think this is a big deal, a serious matter for inmates. As Mr. Raymond Wong said, well, cigarettes is a currency in jail. If you ban cigarettes, that can cause a problem in order. Meals is another important issue that have management implications. Believe me, there's supposed, fried flat noodles with beef is not a dish supposed to be available in the prison, but I can tell you that some inmates can have them. Well, because the meals served are so bad, then the inmates can use their means to ensure that they can have access to it. So it is another kind of currency as well.
So if you do not do anything to improve the on the quality of food or the quality of meals provided in prisons, then problems will arise. And because the food provided by the CSD is not satisfactory, many inmates suffer from poor health as a result. The CSD will, of course, say that the menus are designed by dietitians, and so there should be an adequate supply of nutrients to the inmates. But then if the cooking methods or if the cooking is unsatisfactory, then people will lose their appetite. And so I think something must be done to improve upon the quality of meals in prisons. So Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, I hope that you, in fact, do not intend to really slash the expenditure on food. I hope that you are moving this amendment in order to stimulate discussion. Now, Chairman, I understand that we cannot propose any amendment with a charging effect. I think if we can move such amendments, I think we should move amendments to increase the budget for food. If you ask inmates what improvements they want to see in prisons, I believe the inmates will mention food as one of the areas which require improvement. And then concerning the nicotine patches, Mr. Leung Kwok-hung is right. It's difficult to persuade the inmates to quit smoking because people feel very bored and demoralized when they are in prison. But then I want to say that people are put in prison because they need a chance to reflect over what they have done and to repent. So it is just natural that prison life is boring. And I think we should take the opportunity to persuade the inmates to quit smoking. According to some inmates, when they are imprisoned during the initial stage, they still think of the so-called good old days. But then after some time, they will begin to reflect over their wrongdoings, and they will feel that they really need to repent. For those serving long sentences, they will gradually start to plan for their future. So I think the nicotine patches are helpful to inmates who should be persuaded to give up smoking. Now, because these inmates who smoke really need such supplies, so please do not support Mr. Leung Kwok-hun's proposal to slash the funding for on these items. If the funding is slashed, that will not do the inmates any good. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Albert Chan, I would like to say that I oppose amendment number 157, but I support amendment number 158. Chairman, amendment 157 relates to the budgeted amount for meals, and he is proposing to reduce the funding from over 97 million to $7.24 million. So that's only 7% of the original budgeted amount for diets. I think maybe Mr. Leung Kwok is too busy and he may not have read these figures. I believe Mr. Leung may decide that this amendment should not be supported when he learns of these figures. In fact, Mr. Leung Yiu-chung has already put forward some forceful arguments just now. Now, concerning the government logistics department's plans for diets in correctional institutions. Now, I want to say that the diets in correctional institutions are the responsibility of the government logistics department. So the dividing line is 1.43 million, and above that level, the logistics department is responsible for tendering. But less than this, for amounts less than 1.43 million, then the CSD is responsible for the tendering. So unless the CSD breaks down one contract into smaller ones, for example, 365 contracts covering the 365 days in a year, the tendering should be done by the logistics department, and we're talking about 5.07 million kg with regard to the diets for the inmates. And the number of inmates was about 9,117, and the establishment of the CSD was 6,833. So in other words, the total number of people who need the diet is 16,054 for 365 days in a year. So, Chairman, if you do some calculations, you know that each person per day gets $16.59 on the average for all the meals in a day. So is this amount enough, Mr. Leung Yiu-chung? And we're talking about CST staff as well as all the inmates. I think the administration should give us a reply. $16.59, not per meal, but per day. Some organizations have organized activities, giving people $10 or $20 to buy food for one meal. And in fact, it's very difficult to do so. So long hair, we will be talking about $1.16 per person. And you know, that's not even enough to buy an egg. An egg nowadays costs more than $1. We did move motions to reduce the expenditure on purchasing certain supplies. And if such supplies are not purchased, there will not be very grave consequences. And in fact, we have proposed to slash the funding so that the department will take a fresh look at its own practices and policies. But you know, if people don't have enough food, they die. We are filibustering because we want to highlight maladministration on the part of many government departments. We want to show how shameless and incompetent the government is. We want to show people how ridiculous certain government policies are. But here we're talking about food for the inmates and the CST officers. We're talking about diets. So we do support many of the amendments put forward by Mr. Leung Kwok-hun. But then for this one, I don't think people's power can support this one. And then the other amendment 158, relates to the slashing of $100,000 for the department to purchase nicotine patches. We support this amendment. Chairman, these nicotine patches are useless. In fact, I had several fierce debates with Dr. Yiu-chung. I told him that the government's smoking cessation policy could not be extended to prisons. In fact, we have people smoking everywhere in the prisons. So let me take this opportunity to criticize Yiu-chung and his policies once again. And I want to say this, Chairman, that is, we've done some research and I've got these figures for members' reference. In the past 5 years, concerning male and female smokers in prison. Now, for males in 2008, 95.2% were smokers. In 2009, 96.3%, 2010, 94.4%, 2011, the similar situation. And then last year, and I believe Dr. Yiu-chung will be happy to hear that, the percentage dropped to 89.6%. So when compared with the percentage in 2008, there was a drop of 6 percentage points. So I think we're all glad to learn about this. And so some of the measures implemented by the CSD might have been useful. But then let's look at the female penal population. And you can't help asking yourself why the measures were effective among male prisoners only. For female prisoners, the percentage of smokers has been increasing. In 2008, the percentage was 30.6%, and the corresponding percentage for the male population or the male prisoners was 95.2%. But then we saw an upward trend.
31.3% in 2009, 38.9% in 2010, 38.9% in 2011. Strange. In 2010 and 2011, for the 2 years, the percentages for both male prisoners and female prisoners did not change. So this is really very puzzling. It's difficult to understand why the percentages did not change. Perhaps the Director of Order should look at why there was no change at all to the percentages in 2010 and 2011. How come in both years, 2010 and 2011, for male prisoners who were smokers and female prisoners who were smokers, the percentages remained exactly the same? And then 2012, 42.7%. So in 2008, it was 30.6%. And then 2012, the percentage surged to 42.7%. So it was a 32.5. That was an extra 12.5%. And in fact, if you look at the percentage increase, it was over 40%. So that was really alarming. The CSD has some policies and plans to help inmates cease smoking. Of course, there are nicotine patches, and there's also a steering committee to try to exercise tobacco control within prisons through talks, through counseling, through encouragement and assistance given to the inmates.
The department also posts up posters, mounts poster design competition, and also conducts smoking cessation courses, etc., to promote a smokeless culture amongst inmates. Moreover, in the various penal institutes, there was the setting up of smokeless or smoke-free cells. This is for the choice of inmates. Also, there are different measures that are designed together with the Department of Health and other organizations in order to encourage inmates to voluntarily give up smoking. And you may think that this has worked on the male inmates instead of the female inmates. I think the efforts have failed with female inmates. The population of female inmates has jumped. Why is that so? Mr. Leung Kwok-hun is proposing to slash the expenditure for nicotine patch. I think it affords a very good opportunity for the different quarters to understand the issue more and also to pinpoint the smoking problem in prison. We hope that we can use this debate while we do not have any corresponding officials here. We are talking to the CED Bureau. Maybe I think they want to replace the Secretary for Security with the Secretary for SED or CED. Of course, these important posts would have to be taken up by the right politically inclined people. So we support Amendment 158, but we cannot support 157, which is a slashing of the expenditure on diets. We think that will bring about a crisis. So we cannot support the slashing of diet expenditure to just 7%. I can't see how people can have 3 meals in a day with just $1. $16 is already impossible. Of course, this may be done through tendering, but how can you say people can have 3 meals with just $17 a day? It's really questionable. So we support one of the amendments but object to the other. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Raymond Wong Yuk-man? Chairman, please may I request a head count.
唔係有記招嘅咩？
分去。
即係趕咗走咗翻嚟。
黃毓民議員。
Mr. Raymond Wong. Mr. Chairman. I rise to speak on Amendments 157 and 158 proposed by Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. We have a different position from Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. With regard to 157, to resolve to cut the expenditure under Head 30, Subhead 118 by $7.24 million, and that is the 97 million odd should be reduced to 7 million only. We think this is inhuman because the diets are for the inmates, not for other people. And also, regarding 158, to reduce $100,000 from Head 30, Subhead 000. This will be for the purchase of nicotine patch. First, on diets. We have received a lot of complaints from prison inmates saying that the diets leave a lot to be desired. I have seen them for myself. For example, there is a midnight snack, there is breakfast and the proper meals, etc., that they are nutritional, etc., etc. But indeed, the food does not afford a lot of nutrition. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung is not here. He said just now that if you were in prison, you would have a chance to understand the situation. But I don't have to go to prison in order to understand the situation. And I think he was saying perhaps that on the 16th of May, I would be thrown into jail. And Mr. Chairman, it would be good for you to stop the filibuster on the 16th of May then. I have seen the meals provided in prisons. I don't think they are nutritional. And also the quality of the food is extremely bad. I think I can fairly put it that way. It is only on certain occasions during the year, Mid-Autumn Festival, Christmas, and also the first day of the Chinese New Year, they will give you better food. It may be, there may be mutton, but that must have been frozen for a long time. And they may give you 2 chicken wings or a joystick. That's it. And certainly, in the canteen, you cannot trade food. You cannot say, I don't like chicken wings, I want to give them to another one. That is not allowed. But of course it's not allowed, but people are still doing it. And some people use cigarettes to exchange for a joystick because someone may have cigarettes. As I said, cigarettes are a currency in the prison and they can exchange for a drumstick. And of course, those who are rich will enjoy an advantage because people ferry different commodities to the prison to them. But then there are also many rules stopping the import of commodities into prison. But rules are rules, and as long as you are rich, you can still get hold of different kinds of food even if you are in prison. So the rules in a way are there to be broken, but the situation is really miserable for those who are poor and imprisoned. Therefore, I don't agree that we should cut down on the expenses on diets for penal institutions. I really object to this. In many prisons, including Stani, Hailing Chow, and we have received also complaints saying that there is not enough food provided. Very often, for breakfast, there is just some or a piece of meat of very poor quality. It just keeps you alive instead of satiates your appetite. And also the fried fillet of fish stink. I don't know what kind of fish they use. So people who are imprisoned will know that they are sustained. They will not starve to death, but they are not given a good nutrition. And if you have a big appetite, you can wake up in the middle of the night because of hunger pangs.
There was a case called Chen Kin-shum, who was released in 2010. He asked for the right for inmates to vote while jailed. I think he was imprisoned in Hailing-Chau, and whenever he talked about meals provided by prisons, he would get very agitated. So-called used required in writing. He sent a letter to CST asking for information on meals, but that was ignored. But of course, people are subject to a different treatment. A famous person, Arena, he is an Indian. He could have Western cuisine, Indian cuisine without pork. He had curry, naan to go with lamb and beef and chicken. So as you have enough money, you can have what you want. And there is another famous person. I don't want to name him. He is a close acquaintance. He could apply for meals served from outside the prison because he had money. So he, when he was in prison, he said, I won't take the meals you serve. I will only take meals provided from outside the prison. So if we cut the provision here, it is very problematic. So I will certainly oppose this amendment. All right, nicotine patch. Now, you try to ban smoking in cigarettes, and you will start a riot. This is interesting. This culture is interesting. As I said, cigarettes is a currency in prison. There are only a few smokers. You can just about 5 of them in this council. Of course, for these smokers, they don't have a problem of not being able to smoke. They can have all the cigarettes they want. It's just about where and when they can take a puff. Now, Wang Yang, he was jailed in Lai-chi-kok, and asked him, well, do you have cigarettes to smoke? He asked me to bring him some. Well, he was not in detention. He was already convicted, and the 2 categories of inmates are subject to different treatment. I told him, well, you want cigarettes? Okay, I just make a call, and you can have all the cigarettes you want in Lai-chi-kok. His wife would not agree, but he still got cigarettes because he was in separate confinement. The person next to his cell gave him cigarettes continuously, so he could still have cigarettes when he was in jail. So it depends on who you are. Well, I once received a complaint involving a shack pick. Well, because of tobacco duty increase, well, there was a big problem because earnings in prison or wages in prison were not raised, and therefore they could not afford cigarettes. And they had a team. They formed a team and wrote to me, and they said, Yuk-man, you better petition on our behalf. Those cigarettes are not really quality cigarettes, but because of tobacco duty increase, now let me tell you, prisoners really hate the financial secretary. He's not here. John Zhang, let me tell you, the prisoners really hate you because you have hiked tobacco duty for a number of times. Wages can be spent on snacks and cigarettes. Now, earnings can be adjusted for you to buy snacks to catch up the inflation of prices. But for cigarettes, well, even if there is an increase in tobacco duty, they will not increase the earnings for buying cigarettes, claiming that they want to help prisoners to quit smoking. So I wrote a very detailed letter to CSD asking for very detailed information on the terms of inmates and also the earnings, and which part is for buying snacks and which part is for buying cigarettes. I asked for such information from the CSD, and then I received a reply telling me that in the long term, they hope prisoners can be smoke-free. I think they are dreaming. I think this is just an excuse to brush us off. How can you make a prison smoke-free? Can you imagine a prison that is smoke-free? No, you will certainly start a riot there. It's hard for you to manage a prison when it is smoke-free. So, the wages for buying cigarettes were not increased. And then that's how the nicotine patches came about. With $100,000, how many patches can you buy? How many prisoners can you help to quit smoking? So isn't it superfluous? It's a waste of money. It's totally pointless. And it's even more pointless to buy cigarettes of $100,000. You're going to buy cigarettes with $100,000 for distribution to prisoners is even more meaningless. So this provision is superfluous. It's just for window dressing to tell you that we have a provision for buying nicotine patches so that we can have fewer and fewer prisoners who are smokers, and that you're helping them to kick the habit. Let me tell you, nicotine patches are useless. I was a smoker for decades, and I have already quit smoking for 11 years. I did not join classes. I did not use nicotine patches. I relied on my determination. I respect smokers. It's okay for me to inhale secondhand smoke, because I was a culprit for so many years, and I don't mind suffering from secondhand smoke now. But in a prison, nicotine patches is just window dressing. You claim that you are encouraging prisoners to quit smoking. The reality is, for smokers that are addicted, it's impossible for them to quit the habit. They have nothing better to do, and if you don't even allow them to smoke, how can they keep themselves occupied? You're sure to see more fights and disputes and trouble. I think the CSD knows full well the consequences. So out of the blue, you have $100,000 for buying nicotine patches. What effect do you expect? If it's just for the sake of helping prisoners to quit smoking, it's bound to be futile. It's just window dressing. What's the point? So I do agree that this $100,000 be cut. There are many other ways to help them to quit smoking. For instance, leading them to become Christians. You rely on Jesus to quit smoking. I went to Shakpik. I went to a detention center to spread the gospel. The gospel can help people to detoxicate, to kick away their habit of taking drugs. I think you can do the same for smoking. So, Chairman, you are so bored. I mean, Mr. So, you're here. You are so bored because this is irrelevant to your portfolio. $100,000 for buying nicotine patches is useless. So I agree that this should be cut. We will now adjourn until 5:30 p.m. tomorrow.